back, everybody. It is the Working Brother back at you with another talk. Yet again, Drago Bosnic is back for weekly digest. Not so weekly digest of some of the articles that he's written. Drago, welcome back. How you doing?
Great being here as always.
Yes, it's always good to have you back. You've always got very interesting topics that seem almost like memes, but they're actually real. So that's always in tune with this comedy show. Everybody who's new here, as always, welcome. Hi. Comedy show. Nothing here has to do with reality. Now that we're getting that out of the way, Drago wrote about Blinken. What did Blinken have to say?
Well, apart from his great musical skills, he's also a politician, if people don't know. In all seriousness, the guy actually said, that was approximately 2 weeks ago. He said that he's okay with Ukraine using long-range US-made missiles to strike Russian targets, deeper within Russian territory. And the missiles in question are the ATACMS, which are relatively long-range. Officially, there are short-range ballistic missiles, but they are long-range enough to pose a threat to Russian supply lines and cities deeper within the Russian territory. So it's definitely a threat to the Russians. It's not like the best missile ever. Obviously, it's inferior to the Russian Iskander or some other missiles that the Russian military is using, but still they can be a threat, especially when paired with the NATO ISR. Intelligence, reconnaissance, and surveillance. When paired with these American and NATO reconnaissance systems, these missiles are more deadly because, and this is one of the things I argued in the article, this war is perfect for NATO because in an actual shooting war between Russia and NATO, NATO would not be able to use its reconnaissance systems as effectively because the Russians would just shoot.
You mean... You mean all the cheating that they're doing off map? Basically, they're like prying eyes from the edge of the Black Sea and the edge of the European border that are overlooking and targeting basically all of Ukraine and Donbass and some Russia.
Yeah, this is the best possible scenario for NATO because the Ukrainians are doing all the dying, all the dirty work, while they are just, as you said, prying everything and spying on everything and just relaying the information to the Ukrainians. And if there was a real shooting war with the Russians, the Russians would just send their S-400s and then Su-35s and Su-57s to shoot down these things from 400 kilometers away. So there's no way NATO could ever wage war like this against Russia. So it's perfect for them.
But in the second article, because you've got two here about the ATACMS thing, in the second article you outline how they can respond to it and and the armed drones. When you say armed drones, are you talking about the water drones or the flying drones?
I'm actually talking about flying drones, the unmanned flying ones. So the point is in this case the drones are not as dangerous as the ATACMS because the drones can be shot down. The Russians have proven that by shooting down as far as they claim 100 Bayraktar drones that the Ukrainians had so far. And they've also downed dozens in Syria and Libya, so it's not a new thing for them. The real problem actually comes from the drones, which are small, which are operated by these various diversion groups and sabotage groups that might spring up in Russia in various cities and places. But the real problem is the ATACMS, and the Russians can respond to it effectively by shooting down these American and NATO ISR systems. However, what they could do, they could shoot down the drone systems, the flying drone ISR, for example, the Global Hawk, as a warning to other manned aircraft, ISR.
We already had one of those incidents where they basically dumped fuel on it, right?
Exactly. But this is more serious. This is more serious because what the Russian military could do, they could redefine what warfare is. Because at the moment, looking at the enemy is not warfare. And even relaying information to the enemy, about the enemy to some other combatant or to some other side in the conflict is still not considered war. However, the Russians could redefine it because, like, without the information that NATO is providing, Ukrainians could never target, the Russian military, its supply lines, or other Russian cities, like at that range, because they don't have such ISR systems. NATO does, and if NATO relays that, and it results in like higher Russian casualties, the Russians could just decide, okay, we've had enough. Like, we can't allow to have any more casualties because of this. So, like, they could redefine what warfare is, and if they do that, then we're in a dangerous territory. Of course, it's not the Russians' fault; it's the fault of NATO, which is like playing with fire all the time by denying direct involvement, but still like being involved almost as directly as they could possibly be.
Conspiracy theories, man. Conspiracy theories. That's
Russian
all I have to
propaganda.
tell you. Russian propaganda and conspiracy theories. There are going to be memes this episode as well. Like, I think I'm going to keep this as a going theme, like to have a couple of more memes than usual than we've had so far. The subscribers' response has been good so far. Let's see what other meme we got here. Oh, this one's good. Classic. Let's get back to your news, because some people want the news. Others want memes. The memes have news these days, and the news have become memes themselves. Like, seriously, what is this? Tell us about Baerbock and her 360.
I guess this is already old news at this point, but Baerbock actually called Xi Jinping a dictator, which, I mean, regardless if you agree or disagree with that, it's not a very smart thing or a diplomatic thing to do, especially when Germany is actually in a very, very bad place when it comes to the economy. And China, as we all know, is Germany's like largest trading partner and a massive
Wasn't there
market.
like a German delegation who went, like, I think even Schultz was there, like, recently, within the last, I don't know, a month or so, begging for all kinds of things from China?
Yeah, exactly. That's the point. And this is where this, like, only just a bit later than that came Baerbock's statement. I guess they didn't get what they asked for, so that's why she said that. If they did, well, China would be perfectly democratic, or at least they wouldn't comment on it at all. So the point is, like, to say this, like, even if the Chinese refuse what the Germans are asking for, to comment something like this is only going to make things worse for Germany, because the Chinese are going to be like, okay, well, we can find other partners, and we don't give a damn about your economy. It can go to hell as far as we're concerned. And like, they could exacerbate the situation for the Germans. I mean, this isn't the first stupid statement by Baerbock. As we all know, like, she effectively declared war in Russia. I think it was last or at some point during this year. I can't remember exactly. When she said, like, we
Honestly,
are
she said so many stupid things recently that I can't keep track of all of them. So, like, there's that 360 thing.
right.
There's something about 180 as well. There's
Yeah,
there's been so many retarded things that she said. It's just like, it's obvious
and
that
she's the first diplomat of Germany. So I don't know. It's just hilarious.
Green Party, man, Green Party.
Yeah,
Woohoo.
Green Party. Exactly.
That's all I have to say. Another piece of stale news. The embarrassing episode of the best fighter jet ever made. We've made reference to that in the meme extravaganza and a couple of other episodes. But tell us what you wrote about here.
Yeah, well, I just went into greater detail than you and Mr. Flores did. Essentially, like, what happened, obviously, is that an American pilot ejected from the F-35, and because it's the best fighter jet ever made, it continued flying, for the next 70 miles or so, in God knows where, because, as we all know, the Pentagon asked for help from the American public to find, the aircraft. I mean, it's an aircraft, right? It's not that you can just lose an aircraft like that. Well, unless you're the Pentagon, obviously.
It's stealth, man. It's stealth.
It can't be seen. That's the reason. Like, it's possible to see it. So that's the reason they lost. I mean, they found it eventually, obviously, but it was just another embarrassing episode for this poor fighter, I have to say, because I feel sorry for the jet at this point, man. I just feel sorry for it.
It's really amazing. It just hasn't gotten out all its kinks. That's the official line, I'm pretty sure. Lavrov.
Yeah, Lavrov essentially said, well, this is what perfectly actually ties into the story about the ATACMS, because Lavrov essentially said that America is at war with Russia, but although not officially, but effectively it is. If we consider all things, it effectively is because America is involved in everything except pulling the trigger. But it's involved in ordering what sort of targets the Ukrainians will hit, with what weapons, and so on and
I don't
so
know
on.
about you,
So,
man, but I've seen some trigger pullers passports that have shown up on the battlefield. So I don't know.
oh yeah,
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm
yeah,
pretty sure that
that,
there's
like,
Americans pulling triggers. Not
yeah, if
officially.
we consider Americans, yeah, who are fighting for officially for the Ukrainian, but at least America as a country officially is not at war with Russia. Although you're right, that's not really like a very good indicator because America has not been officially at war since I think the Korean War or maybe even World War II because they haven't really declared war on anyone so far. They just do it in a democratic way, in a very stealth way, I should say.
Yes, democracy. I was sitting with one of my friends the other day, and we were talking, and he's like talking about the West, and he's like, when I was younger, like these ideals and like whatever. I'm like, what ideals? He's like, democracy and freedom and all this like human rights and shit. I was like, man, that doesn't exist. Like, what the hell are you talking about? That's like
When he
fairy
was
tales.
younger, like how young? 9?
Exactly. How young? Basically. Let's see where my mouse is here. There we go. U.S. bioweapons in Nigeria. What?
Oh, actually, that's Russian propaganda. I was thinking about biological medical research facilities, which are designed to spread democracy in Nigeria. I mean, that's the whole point of the article. Like everything else is just Russian propaganda. But in all seriousness, what I did in this article, I was pointing out the fact that the U.S., I mean, the Pentagon specifically, has a great extent of control over the Nigerian military, and they're using their NBC units, nuclear biological chemical protection units, to test various sorts of viruses and bioweapons in Nigeria. And then, the worst part is, they essentially what they do is they also transport these pathogens back to the U.S. and other, labs around the world because they actually operate hundreds of biolabs across the planet. Obviously, under the
And if
pretext
I'm not
of
mistaken, some of these bio samples get sent around as like FedEx packages. Like if they're
yeah,
like not
I wouldn't be surprised because the U.S. the Pentagon has had various flukes and
mishaps.
problems. So, yeah, the fact that they've been sending hundreds of thousands of secret documents to Mali, it's because of a mistake in one letter in the recipient emails. It's just crazy. So I really don't understand what they're trying to do. Nor am I allowed to say, to be honest. But whatever. I think people can make the conclusions by themselves. And it's nothing good. And I've also quoted Russian intelligence, specifically the GRU, that mentioned what sort of experiments they're conducting. And if I say it, I'm pretty sure you're going to get banned or whatever. So people can read it in the article to see what sort of goodies they have for the rest of us.
Yeah, the goodies come from all sides, including
Yeah.
AI. This is John
Yeah.
Connor, not happy with you. Also, on the subject of AI, I came across this meme. And for those that don't know, AI, it's not very AI. It's very if this, then this, then this, then so on. Like it's programmed. So
Yep.
AI is a very loose term, and people should not fall into
I mean, a calculator is technically an AI, right? Because you program
technically
it to,
to do
yeah.
functions.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Are you offended by this program / show? You should be, because if you're not, then you're not getting it. I came across this. This perfectly outlines how and what is actually going on in the battlefield. Okay, break from that. And back to we got the South Caucasus. Fun. Let's get
Oh
into
yeah.
let's get into Greater Turkey and the new Ottoman Empire. I mean,
Oh man.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Yeah, this part is crazy. I mean, I've been like following the situation for years, and I think there hasn't been a worse leader in Armenian history than Pashinyan is. Like this guy, I'm not sure how he's even alive. Because I'm amazed that there are no Armenians who would be ready to blow themselves up just to get this guy out of the way. Because the damage he's done to the Armenian people, which I deeply respect, and I mean support
To
them.
be
I
clear, to
see
be
that
clear, this is a comedy show. We don't advocate anything. This is just like jokes and
exactly,
ha ha he
exactly.
he. But like, yeah, continue.
Yeah, of course, of course. I'm saying that just like as a metaphor, I guess. But the point is like the fact that he's not in jail at least is amazing to me because the damage he's done to the Armenians is crazy. We already know that they've suffered genocide, the Armenian genocide, at the hands of the Ottoman Turks 100 years ago, and like now this is like the continuation of this. And this genocide is not just like against the people, it's also against the culture and the heritage of the Armenians, which is magnificent. I mean, they've had a civilization for over 2 millennia. So, and also they're the first Christian country. And like, I really have deep respect for the Armenian civilization, but I don't understand how they allowed themselves to be led by this person who has effectively destroyed them. And now they've lost one of their multi-millennial lands, native lands, that they call Artsakh, which the rest of the world probably knows as the Nagorno-Karabakh. And now over 100,000 people have been expelled from this area, and there's no like way for them to get back there. And the reason why this happened is because Pashinyan decided to cut most ties with Russia. And now, like, the worst part is he's blaming Russia for this disaster. So, I mean, are the Russians to blame in this case? I mean, what were they supposed to do? Like, were they supposed to go to war with Azerbaijan, which doesn't have bad relations with them at all, for the sake of Armenia, which is led by a guy who's openly advocating the joining of NATO and joining for Armenia to join NATO and the EU and so on, which are openly hostile to Russia. So, I mean, what's the point? Like, how is Russia supposed to wage war for a country that is like officially an ally, but it's not really an ally? So like the Armenian people should try to, at least like try to change this and, get back someone who's actually has a functioning brain to power and try to renegotiate a deal with the Russians that's going to make it possible for Armenia to survive, because this is not just about Artsakh being lost, probably forever, but it's also the fact that the Turks and Azeris will not stop their aggression. Like, they will continue to like attack Armenia, and not just because they hate Armenia. It's not just about emotions in this case. It's also about geopolitical interest, because Armenia is the only thing standing between Turkey and Azerbaijan. So if they need to crush Armenia to, have a mutual border or even unite into one country, they will do that. And Armenia, like the only thing preventing Turkey and Azerbaijan from attacking and destroying Armenia is the Russian military that is based in Armenia. But Pashinyan wants the Russian military out. Like, he wants to remove the Russian military from Armenia, and he wants NATO in. But the problem is the way that he's going to get NATO into Armenia is probably by having Turkey invade the country. That's the only way I can think of Armenia getting into NATO, because Turkey's obviously never going to allow Armenia to become part of NATO.
Um, NATO is a shit show. Like
Yeah,
the Turks and others in there are just like, it doesn't make sense anymore. Um, Tell us about the
absolutely.
Snoop Dogg concert.
Yeah, that's the crazy part. I forgot to say that. Like while the Armenians driven out from their native lands, Pashinyan was extremely busy with other priorities, like organizing a Snoop Dogg concert, which was also like connected to a corruption scandal, because some people from his administration actually paid a lot of money for this to happen, and they did that with state funds. the state funds that they didn't have to give the Armenians from Artsakh to save them, but they did have, the state funds to get Snoop Dogg into the country, because obviously that's way more important.
For the keen observers, you might have noticed that pop-up. For everyone who's bought me a coffee, thank you. Link in the description. You can buy me a coffee if you enjoy what the Working Brother does. Alternatively, you can find my Patreon. And to the new Patreons, thank you for joining. All right, now that that is out of the way, I have to do that from time to time. Everybody does keep this running, kind of, in a virtual sense. Let's move on to Zelensky. Game changers in Ukraine.
Oh, yeah, he was about the M1 Abrams tanks getting into Ukraine. I mean, even if we didn't know about what's happening to the Leopards and the Challenger 2 tanks, we would know, like anyone with a basic military knowledge would know, that M1 Abrams is a steel coffin when it comes to fighting countries like Russia. And for some reason, this propaganda trope keeps springing up. Like, I keep seeing news from the West that this is a game changer. This is going to get the Russians smashed. Push Russia back to the Urals, whatever. And it keeps they keep saying it like as if the rest of the world hasn't seen what happens to these Western heavy tanks when they encounter a serious opponent. I mean, even actually,
PMC Kinder has a video. PMC Kinder has a video.
Yeah.
This is Minecraft SMO PMC. Hilarious.
Well, they did that masterfully, man.
I know. There's even FPV perspective footage. There's like glitching and everything. It's hilarious. I just thought I'd play a bit of that in the background, considering you're talking about Wunderwaffe and how
It's extremely effective against the Russian military, especially if you're playing a game, I guess.
For everybody who's interested in more memes, and you might have missed the last 2 episodes, the florist made a meme, and he also came to discuss a bunch of other memes as the 100th and 101st episode of Working Brother Talks. So I'll leave a link somewhere, and you can check it out there if you haven't already. Now let's get back to your articles. Let me see where that is. That should be here. Wunderwaffe. And then Poland. Lol, this is getting hilarious. Like, the geopolitics of this whole thing is like, wow. The Poles, who are, victims of Nazis, let's put it that way. They were collaborators at some point, but like some of them maybe. But like the point is, the majority of the national sentiment is, victims of Nazis. And then they were cheering on the Galician Nazis at the beginning. And now they're heartbroken. You want to tell us what's going on with these Poles?
Yeah, like I guess it's a very, very like controversial subject for them, because like they're stuck between their obvious hatred for the Nazis, because Nazis killed like millions of Poles and like essentially destroyed the lives of most other Poles in World War II. However, they also have a very like this burning hatred for Russia that they've had for 1,000 years almost now. And, it's very difficult to reconcile these two feelings, because obviously the Nazis hated the Russians too, just as much as they hated the Poles, because they saw both as Untermensch, as they would say, or Untermenschen in the plural. We were all Untermenschen for them, I guess. So they hated all of us. However, like the Poles still have the hatred for the Russians, so they're probably thinking, okay, we're going to, support the Galicians, those that like nuts very much, and like they understand that they are the historical enemies of Poland and the Polish people. However, they consider Russia a bigger threat, so they would support them obviously over Russia. However, that has backfired, as we know, in the Canadian Parliament, where they brought the hero of Ukraine, so to speak, from World War II. I was amazed you were saying that because I was thinking, when they said, "Oh, this was the hero of Ukraine who fought the Soviet Union in World War II." Well, like I don't know who fought the Soviet Union in World War II except the Nazis, right? I mean, fought the Soviet
Um,
Union.
I think the
You were
Japanese did
obviously,
too.
yeah, like,
If
you were
you-
obviously not on the Allied side. I mean, like that's common sense, I guess.
Ukraine
Um,
now.
yeah, yeah, it's common sense, but for them, like it's obviously not. And we're going to talk about that a bit more when we mention the political article that's whitewashing this beautiful ideology called the nuts.
Um, Considering I popped up that like meme slash drawing of the state of Ukraine, as we all know, they communized or whatever they call it, like decommunized the statue in Kiev, and then many days later they realized it has a Z on it, which is hilarious. Um, what were you saying? Which article? Let me see. Is that the next one? Do we have that as the next one? No, we don't. We have the F-16s. Where is that article that you were talking about? Is it this one? Nope. We've got some good articles here.
Yeah, that one. That
Oh,
one.
there we
Yeah,
go.
one, yeah,
This
yeah,
is also what's it called? Um, it's been debriefed by a lot of people. Like a lot of people
yeah,
have talked about this. It was
yeah.
hilarious to watch it happen and to
Yeah,
watch.
but specifically this part is crazy because Politico, which is a German-owned company or newspaper, if you want, they've effectively started whitewashing Nazism, and I mean not I'm not talking about neo-Nazism. I'm talking about actual Nazism, World War II era Nazism, and this is specifically about an article written by Keir Giles, who's a British writer obsessed with Russia and anything that's connected to Russia in any way, and his like burning hatred for Russia is just so crazy that the guy essentially claims in his article he claims that Waffen SS were cool guys. They didn't do anything wrong. Obviously, they were just like they were just effectively Wehrmacht soldiers who were there to I guess help with bringing water and food to everyone. So it's just crazy, like, and the guy claims this, with a straight face, saying that the history of World War II is complicated,
It is
and
complicated, man.
it's not
It
complicated
is.
when they were fighting the West. Like that's clear. The Nazis were bad when they attacked the West. However, when they were fighting against Poles and Russians and Serbs and everyone else, it's complicated. That's where things become complicated. And not all SS members were Nazis, and they were not all bad people. That some of them were actually philanthropists, I guess.
Man, haven't you heard there's no Nazis in Ukraine? And even less than Nazis, there's no Satanists in Ukraine. That's why they don't sell badges like this.
Yeah.
We'll just leave that up there for half a second. And then get back to our F-16 stories. You've got, I think, 2 articles. Let me just find them here. There we go. Whoops. Kiev regime repurposing airfields and civilian infrastructure for F-16s. These F-16s need like clean rooms to be like maintained and stuff, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's like the definition of a high maintenance girlfriend in mechanical form.
Exactly. Like even worse than that. Like you remember when we talked about the how the Russians were putting these like wire protection stuff around their jets for protection against drones.
Yeah,
As you
cope
know,
cages. Yeah.
as you were able to, yeah, cope cages, exactly. Like, as you know, you were able to see that Russian jets can actually stay, outside for prolonged periods of time and still function. However, Western jets cannot do that, and they require like these enclosed spaces where they will be maintained and where they will not be exposed to weather or conditions or anything else in order to be able to function. And because Ukraine was was part of the Soviet Union, all of their airports are like those in Russia. They don't actually have hangars that are suitable for the F-16 to be like stationed at. So now they need to repurpose civilian airfields to be able to receive these F-16s. And obviously there are other problems because the MiG-29s and the Su-27s they used, the Soviet era ones, they were also way more robust than the F-16, so they required less maintenance. It was cheaper. It was easier to maintain. It required less personnel, and the personnel was already familiar with these jets. However, now they have to like employ dozens of more people, like hundreds of more people for every jet that they will, maintain. And it's also going to cost them $27,000 per flight and 16 hours of maintenance per flight hour. So like these things are supposed to survive potential Russian long-range strikes. And then even if they lift off somehow, they have to survive the Su-35s and the Su-57s and the MiG-31s.
What was that record air-to-air kill from a few months ago?
Over 300 kilometers. So
there you go.
It doesn't have the range, any missile with a range of 300 kilometers to match the Russian jets. Also, the radar on the Su-35S has the range of 400 kilometers. And the range of the radar of the latest F-16s, which the Ukrainians will not get, obviously, but the way inferior older version has like 150 to 200 kilometers detection range. So like more than twice as more than 50% less. So
I just realized we didn't draw attention to your shirt when we were doing the Armenia stories, man.
Oh yeah, like it's the system of a down.
System of a down, yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Accidentally, of course. And because I'm used to interrupting you, and you're used to it, and the guests love it. I mean, the viewers. The guests, some of them love it too. This is the BBC. Running low a year ago, and now the West is actually running low. Maybe you can comment on that as we tie it into the second article that you have here about the
point about that article, and it also ties into the meme, as you said. Like the jet that we see on the picture is not F-16, it's the JF-17, the Chinese-made jet. However, the reason why I'm bringing that up is there is a high possibility that Ukraine will get less F-16s because of Argentina and China. Now, if you think that's crazy, I'm going to explain why it's not and why it's happening. The point is the Argentinians need to replace their old U.S.-made jets, specifically the A4, and now they want to buy new ones. However, the Pentagon is upset because they want to buy the Chinese-made JF-17s, specifically Block 3, the latest version, which are new, and they will get approximately 2 squadrons of those. And those jets are very advanced, for the type of the lightweight jets that they are. And now this is a problem for the West because this means that China will get money from this, obviously, and also political influence in Argentina, which, by the way, as we know, is going to join the BRICS Plus format from January 1st, 2024, which is basically in just like 3 months or less than 3 months at this point. So now, like, the Pentagon is in a problem. They can't offer anything, more advanced to Argentina because their, ally, the UK, has a beef with Argentina about the Falklands or the Malvinas Islands, as we know. So they can't really offer anything very advanced. So what they're doing, they're offering older F-16s. And guess who's not going to be getting older F-16s if Argentina gets them? So it's pretty simple. This is why Ukraine is very likely to get less F-16s if Argentina gets them for some reason.
Ukraine, man.
Yeah, it's such a geopolitical conundrum. I mean, Americans got themselves, in this, so they're the ones to blame. But the point is, the crazy thing is now Ukraine, which is like a puppet state of America, is hoping that China is going to defeat America in its geopolitical spat over Argentina, so they could get enough F-16s. Just crazy.
I came across some news earlier today. You might appreciate the irony and humor of it. So-called president of so-called Kosovo, Osmani, traveled to Spain yesterday using her Serbian passport.
Yeah. The Spanish are based beyond they're beyond based as far as I'm concerned, and they're even more based than we are. Because we are forced because of obviously Western pressure to negotiate with these narco guys from the so-called Kosovo, but the Spaniards are just not having it any of it. Like they're just banning them, from left and right, from everything, anything that has to do with international meetings and sports events and so on, and just Spain has been the most the most decisive country when it comes to this. Like they're not like accepting the separatists at all, like in any way. I can't think of any instance where they accepted anything coming from that false country.
We got into that a little bit in the second half of the second part with XF. I'll leave a link here. And he tells us that it's going to come down to remove kebab, basically. In the meantime, we skipped this article about Pashinyan and Saakashvili. Everybody remembers Saakashvili chewing his tie. What do you mean is Pashinyan the new Saakashvili? What are you trying to say, Drago?
What I'm trying to say is the guy is like allied to Russia. I mean, Armenia is officially allied to Russia, and the only reason like he's not Saakashvili 100% or Saakashvili 2.0 when it comes to that is because Armenia, the Armenian people are generally pro-Russian. So at least those who live in Armenia. So the point is what he's trying to do is he's trying to turn Armenia into an enemy of Russia. And, in doing so, he's not just like turning Russia into an enemy of Armenia, but also Iran. As we know, Iran was actually very close to Armenia geopolitically before Pashinyan. And they were even offering support. And actually, they did offer economic support to Armenia. And I mean, the Syunik region in southern Armenia, which Azerbaijanis and Turks are now, eyeing and trying to take away from Armenia, is essential for the economic well-being of Armenia, because as we know, Georgia is an ally of Turkey and Azerbaijan, and they are the country that made it possible for Turkey to transfer all the weapons to Azerbaijan. So like Iran didn't take part in this. Like Iran, there were no like military flights over Iran to Azerbaijan, but there were a lot from that were going over Georgia. So the point is like Iran was essential for the economic well-being of Armenia, and like the only connection that Armenia had with the outside world. So what he did, he effectively he's antagonizing both Russia and Iran while getting no new friends, because Georgia is not going to risk their good relations with Azerbaijan and Turkey for the sake of Armenia. I mean, why would they? Well, they get nothing from it, and they lose a lot. So Armenia is getting increasingly more isolated, just like Georgia became increasingly more isolated during Saakashvili's reign and in the years after that. And that's why this is what makes him the new Saakashvili, and also the fact that he's like antagonizing Russia. And if Russia just decides to leave Armenia, I don't see how Armenia can survive as a state.
No comment.
It's just insane.
I'm thinking of coming out with some merch, and I'm thinking of it's gonna be like the working brother doing like a Zen pose, and there's gonna be a quote with like and that's it. Like that's gonna be the tagline. How Soviet-era doctrine and weapons trump American warfighting. What is American warfighting to begin with, Drago? What are these propaganda terms that you're using?
Describe it in a nutshell. You just send in the guys who call in the airstrikes, and they blow everything up, and you walk in. That's the American doctrine in a nutshell. Like just blow everything up and then send in the boots on the ground, as they say, to walk in, essentially. So
in Yugoslavia, they didn't even get through the whole doctrine in that case. Like they were too chicken shit to walk in.
Yeah, they didn't, because they knew like there'd be tens
no
of
chance.
Thousands. Yeah, like they would have way too. Like at the time, we had one of the most powerful land forces in Europe at the time. And I'm not talking about the JNA being the fourth army in the world and so on. I'm actually talking about being an effective fighting force. And we had like 250,000 soldiers and police officers who were actually militarized. So they were essentially soldiers as well. in Kosovo, fighting off not just like the Albanian terrorists, but also like NATO itself. So like they knew that they would have like way too many casualties, for their comfort, and it would have not been anything remotely similar to Iraq in 2003, for example. So that's why they didn't do
And
it. But
and
the point is like,
anyone who doubts what he just said about NATO, go research some German and British special forces in Kosovo back then. Yeah.
yeah,
Just like to begin with, and you might like get somewhere in your research. But let's not go too far off track. You were saying that the American doctrine basically is what happened to Iraq. Let's put it that way, and or Libya.
or Syria or any other country that was unfortunate enough to be
Experience the full wrath, of
full wrath
American
of
democracy.
Yeah.
It's funny how we came to the same
Yeah.
same conclusion. Anyway, so Soviet era doctrine. Tell us about Soviet era doctrine. What does it mean?
Like, actually, this perfectly ties into what we were talking about the Yugoslav army. I mean, the Serbian army during the 90s, because a lot of our doctrine was based on this Soviet era doctrine, and the Soviet Union was, arguably, the most powerful military force in the history of mankind, and Russia essentially just upgraded that to the 21st century standard. I mean, it's still the same doctrine, just like, I mean, the Russians made the doctrine, so they're using it today as well. Although, as I said, it's updated, obviously, as you do with military doctrines. The point is, like, what I did is why I analyzed this, and I also used several Western media as proof for this, because recently the Business Insider published an article where they said, where they quoted a U.S. combat veteran who's fighting in Ukraine and who actually fought for years in Iraq and Afghanistan, where he said that Ukrainians are better soldiers than Americans. And this is literally what he said, that Ukrainian soldiers are better soldiers than Americans. And also what he did, like, he mentioned several instances where Ukrainian soldiers and commanders would say, if we used NATO doctrine, in the battlefield to the letter, we would all die. Like, we would have like 4 times as many casualties, if you can imagine that even. So what they do is they essentially revert back to Soviet era fighting techniques to survive in the battlefield, on the battlefield. So what I did is I compared, the performance of various Western systems, especially in the latest counteroffensive, with the performance of Soviet systems modernized Soviet systems that the Ukrainians used for the last year and a half. And, what the battlefield data suggests is that the Western systems, which were, praised, and presented as these Wunderwaffen, as you said, they proved to be inferior to 1960s and 1970s Soviet era, techniques and like fighting techniques and equipment and weapons and so on. And the point is, Ukrainians are actually more successful in using these weapons against the Russians than using Western weapons. So it's, like the Russians themselves are also saying that Soviet era stuff is a higher danger for their soldiers on the ground than anything the West gave to Ukraine so far.
In this other article, you highlight NATO-trained Ukrainian conscripts surrendering en masse. Because, Ukrainian conscripts surrendering en masse is nothing new. But you're highlighting NATO-trained ones here. Why?
Exactly. I'm highlighting because those that were trained by NATO, that weren't trained by the Ukrainian army before that, are actually surrendering faster than those who were trained, who just had regular service in the Ukrainian army before. Especially like this particular case is that these conscripts were trained by the SAS, or the Special Air Service, one of the most prominent, UK special forces, and they trained many of these units, and these units were the first to surrender, which goes against the narrative that we see in the Call of Duty, where the SAS are the baddest, or the most badass, special forces in the history of mankind. So it's very interesting how the battlefield, destroys propaganda narratives.
Man, It's all Russian propaganda. Nothing is happening on the battlefield, and the Ukrainians are winning. I don't know what you're talking about. U.S. escalates meddling in internal affairs of Bangladesh. So people don't say that we're racist and we don't talk about any other countries or don't care about anything else. Internal affairs in Bangladesh. What's going on there? Close in.
Yeah, well, the current prime minister, Mrs. Sheikh, is, according to the U.S., is a dictator, right? Just like Mr. Xi Jinping is, or I'm not sure what the name for a dictator woman is, whatever. So the point is, she's being accused of suppressing a democracy, and she's also being accused of, improperly conducting elections, which is rich coming from a country that is indicting the former president with the most ridiculous indictments you can imagine, just so he couldn't run effectively against the incumbent president. So it's crazy, like how Americans see the flaws in democracy in other countries. However, they don't see the gaping holes in their own democracy that are like getting wider and wider by the day.
We all know this meme, the Russia lost simulator.
Oh yeah.
But now it's become real.
Oh man, yeah.
I think we've covered. There's another Pashinyan article, but I think we've beaten the dead horse as far as he's concerned today.
Yeah.
This is from my personal stash from a very long time ago. If these sports bother you more than the economy, then it's time to wake up. This was sent in by somebody, TikTok school in Serbia. If you want to go learn how to be a TikTok influencer, and then at the bottom it says, Putin, please hit them hard. This I flashed in the background. This we saw. Let's flip. This is the Pope. We all know the Pope. Nothing changes. History repeats. I flashed it earlier when you were talking. This is actually a doormat in front of my cousin's house in Moscow, and I went to visit him. Shout out to my cousin, who probably never watched this. But the point is, it says, please stay on the line. Your visit is very important to us. It's the perfect doormat. You are the universe pretending to be a bird. Now remember that. And this is also from my personal meme stash from 15 years ago or something, when when ISIS and whatever was like freedom fighters and so on in Syria. This everyone can relate to. Old people driving. Imagine old people running countries.
Yeah, I wonder how, I don't think we have any examples of that.
No. Reality is not as bad as the memes. In reality, though, Возмездие, friends of the show, posted this. In America, a TikTok game based on a popular meme, Glory to Urine, instead of Ukraine, has been revived. There's an actual game. And let me find the video. PMC Kinder, and then we can go here, and then we can click next. And this is a video. It's an actual game inside TikTok that you can play, and you get points and stuff.
Glory to ring, glory to.
I'm not on TikTok, nor will I ever be.
As
Probably.
If I didn't need any more reasons not to ever install TikTok. You just gave me one.
Yeah. What can I say? Oh, we got some Halloween ideas. Halloween's coming up soon. If you want to scare people as the beggar, I've come across this.
Right. I'm so glad that it's another American holiday I'm going to skip.
Conspiracy theorists be like this. And this one is also from the Ahmadinejad Times. This is a classic. For the meme lovers who are here for the memes and not for the news or for Drago. And I think we've covered more or less everything. Drago, is there anything that you'd like to touch upon maybe that we didn't bring attention to?
Yeah, we probably talked about this with Mr. Florist, but what I would call people to do is to follow his Florisberg channel, because it's probably the most hilarious thing I've ever seen in recent times. and it's just, I mean, you have to really pay attention because it's it's just perfect. It looks like real news, and oftentimes turns to be prophetic. But it's satire. The best part about it is satire, but it's almost as if it's real. So and it's great. I mean, he's a brilliant analyst, and he can foresee a lot of stuff. A lot of things that he said before that seemed crazy to a lot of people turned out to be true, and he continues to do that. And Floresburg is probably the best. Floresburg News is probably the best place you can get the firsthand knowledge of that.
Satirical news from our friend the florist. Yes.
Yeah.
I'll leave links to the other episodes where we had him on. And I'll leave links naturally to your Telegram where you post all your links to the BRICS articles. Yeah. Thank you for stopping by. This was impromptu, more or less. Good to have you on as always, everybody. Keep calm. Wait for Russians. And all that other good stuff. Like, share, subscribe, donate, blah, blah. Thank you. And, yeah. See you soon.